Right, great interview. Now for the other side, let's bring in Oklahoma Congressman Markwayne Mullin. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
A couple points I want to bring up that Congressman Rowe brought up. First and foremost, in elections, really change is the new normal, and we're seeing these candidates run on Medicaid for all, minimum wage, college for all, and the congressman there said that he's a free enterprise supporter, but he does support Medicare for all. And I want to get your reaction to some of those points that he brought up earlier in the interview.
Well, you got to look at the parties right now. At any time, I think, in recent history, you're seeing a more divide. You're seeing the Democrat Party move to a socialist-style country. And one thing you can guarantee in any socialist country, they control two things. They control your medical expenses, your hospital stays, everything to do with you, and they control your food supplies. So when you see a country starting to move towards socializing medicine, you've got to be concerned. And now you're seeing Cortez stand up and say she wants not only Medicare for all, but a guaranteed job and guaranteed housing for all. You're seeing them move towards to saying, hey, we want the government to take care of everything about us. And when you do that, you lose all the free that we have inside this country.
Well, and keep in mind that a lot of these candidates are winning primaries, so we're going to sort of see as the midterms get
how that plays out.
Absolutely. Right? But he mentioned a point. He said, listen, in his argument that we would be saving money because the current Medicare bill is upwards, if I'm not mistaken, he said $49 trillion, and he says with the math and someone who has a background in economics, it would be 32. Is that
well,
right?
Absolutely. And I've been in business for 20 years. I understand numbers really well. Just look at what's happened to the states that expanded Medicaid. They're going bankrupt. Look what happened to our expenses in the healthcare industry when Obamacare really got up and running. You saw people moving away from even being able to afford the health insurance that they had to get, and decided it was cheaper for us to pay the penalty. I represent 36 rural hospitals inside my district. Out of 36 rural hospitals, I only have 4 that's operating in the black. Every one of them are going bankrupt because underneath Obamacare, they said, hey, you're going to have more people come into your office that's going to have insurance, so we're going to lower the cost of Medicaid, but yet you got to expand it. Well, what happened is that didn't actually work out. The math didn't work out there either. So anytime you're moving towards socialized medicine, to which Roe is talking about, you can guarantee cost is going to go up, and it's going to be shouldered on the backs of everybody else that's out there working, paying taxes, and it's going to bankrupt this country. Okay,
let's shift gears. You talked a little bit about numbers, and I want to talk about taxes. He
Absolutely.
talked about the EITC, and he also talked about child care, making those cuts permanent. I don't know if that's going to be something that the Republicans are talking about. We heard Congressman Brady come out. He says he wants to make the tax cuts permanent. The corporate ones are obviously already permanent, but we're talking about the ones that expire in 2025. He said it's going to help the middle class, but I didn't hear a lot of specifics out of him when he was at the White House.
When we first started talking about this, I was actually in a room with Chairman Brady and President Trump, General Mattis. There was a whole bunch of us that was at the White House discussing this when 2.0 first came out. The idea is to take the tax cuts that we have that have been working. 6.6 million jobs have been created, 1.3 million just since tax cuts have been put in place. There's more people hiring than there is jobs available.
Is that why you're doing 2.0 though, what you just said? Because you basically just gave me a commercial ahead of the midterms, right? In just one sentence. Is that why Republicans are bringing up 2.0? Because you're not going to get this passed in the Senate.
It's the timing. The policy is right. In politics, timing is just as important as a policy. So when you start thinking about trying to make the tax cuts permanent, which we need to make permanent, when you're looking at the House is going to pass this.
Senate's not.
The Senate might pass it because it's got a lot of senators that's up for re-election that's in purple states. Are they really? Yeah, but are they really going to vote against something that's been extremely popular throughout America? When you got 642 companies, large companies across the country that is giving out bonuses or benefits and counting, when you see just in Oklahoma, the average person in Oklahoma's take-home pay is increased by $600 or $1,600. That's equal to what we're seeing across the country. When you're saying that, hey, are you going to really vote against this? Something that has spurred our economy?
Every Democrat voted. I mean, you didn't get one Democratic vote on the first version.
But we're going to put them in a position and say, are you going to vote against something that's been great for America? Are we better off today than we were when Trump first came into office? The answer to that is yes. Why? Because of the tax cuts.
Okay. So Chairman Brady said, listen, this is going to come to a vote in September. Is it?
I believe September could be aggressive.
Right. Very.
But it could be. I will say we'll vote on this either in September or October. Now, keep in mind, we're going to be working through August. We have working groups that's going to be very busy without all the clutter going on because the House is going to be out. You can get a lot more done in a short period of time because you're not as distracted. So it's possible. And I tell you what, Chairman Brady, we've seen is very consistent, very cool, calm, and evenly keeled. And this guy, if he wants to do it in September with the president's support, we can do it. But we also got to fund the government too. So there's a lot ahead of us in September.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Congressman Mullen from
Appreciate
Oklahoma. Thank you very much.
We're still trying to figure out what happened to Jake, but we do know what happened to Brian Kemp. He's joining us via Skype right now. It's good to see you, sir. You certainly scared Jake, I think, in that one, where he's a very good actor. These ads, though, are they too polarizing come the midterms, or do you think they're going to be okay?
Well, I think they're going to be just fine. Jake's warming on me a little bit. If you look at our last commercial that we've been using in the runoff, I would encourage your viewers to go out there and check out KempForGovernor.com. And, I'll take their honest judgment on those ads. They've certainly been well received in the great state of Georgia, where we do have a healthy appreciation for the Second Amendment. And people like, crazies that like an unapologetic conservative that will do what they're doing, say what they're thinking. I think that's one of the reasons that the president endorsed me. I'm very grateful for that. That has been like gasoline being poured onto the fire that we had built with the momentum in this race. And certainly glad to have the vice president coming to Macon, Georgia today. We're going to have a big rally down there. And this campaign for me is really about putting Georgians first ahead of the special interest.
Macon is a good town, has a special place in my heart. I know it does yours as well. The bigger question, though, is let's just say you get through the primary here. President Trump won Georgia by only 5 points. You've got a African-American woman there running on the Democratic side. She's sort of arguing for this big tent policy and big tent platform on her campaign. Does this very narrow, tough on immigration, big Second Amendment push, does it work to bring out enough voters in November?
Well, I think if you don't think like the liberal media and you actually look at the commercials, they're talking about making Georgia #1 for small business, fundamentally reforming how state government spends taxes and operates. So we put more money in hardworking Georgians' pockets, cut government regulations, rather than big government programs like Stacey Abrams. If she wants to line up with that person that just got elected from Congress in New York, Georgians are just not going to be there for that. They want smaller, more efficient government. That's what I've been campaigning on. That's what I'm going to do as governor.
It's interesting you bring up Ocasio-Cortez. We did a segment on that earlier. I asked some Democrats exactly about the point you just made. If Democrats in places like Georgia are going to have to answer for the far left wing of the party. Before you can get to that question, though, you got to get through this primary runoff on Tuesday. You've got some ads on the air, as does your opponent, Mr. Cagle, the lieutenant governor. Take a listen. We'll get you to respond.
After 20 years in politics, these are Brian Kemp's victims. 26 women sexually assaulted during massages. 57 farmers stiffed for millions. Hundreds of seniors hurt by abusive nurses. 6 million Georgians exposed to identity theft. After 20 years of failures, what's Brian have to say?
I say Merry Christmas.
And you say?
I say that fake news is alive and well from a career politician that's been in office for 24 years, as long as I've been married. I just spoke to the Faith and Freedom Coalition here in Georgia, and I told them, I said, the thing about our campaign and about me as a father, as a small business owner, as someone that served in the legislature and currently fighting as Secretary of State, the truth is on my side. That is why we're surging. If you look at that ad, a recent mailer that Cagle put out about some sort of Trump propaganda saying the Trump supports Casey Cagle and I don't. I mean, that is just a lie.
Well, we certainly have the tweet from the president on that. We're going to ask Mr. Cagle about that when he joins us in the next hour. Meantime, we appreciate you being here and making time before going to see the vice president. And we'll have you back if you win and are running for governor. It'd be great to chat with you, sir.
Look forward to coming back.
Next time, bring Jake. We got some questions for him too about how it all worked out.
Well, we're looking forward to having him working for us in the future.
All right. Good to see you, sir. Liz?
Begin by stating that I have full faith and support for America's great intelligence agencies, always had. And I have felt very strongly that while Russia's actions had no impact at all on the outcome of the election, let me be totally clear in saying that, and I've said this many times, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election took place.
Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. Following heavy criticism from Democrats and Republicans, President Trump this week walked back his comments on Russian election meddling, claiming he misspoke Monday during a news conference with Vladimir Putin when he said he couldn't see any reason why Moscow would have interfered in the 2016 campaign. Those comments causing a firestorm and putting the president at odds with the U.S. intelligence community and members of his own party in Congress. This as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gets set to head to the Hill next week, where he's sure to face a grilling from lawmakers over just what was discussed at the Helsinki summit. And as the White House prepares for a potential second sit-down in Washington this fall. Retired four-star General Jack Keane is a Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, good to have you here.
Good to be here, Paul.
So after this week of up back and forth, where do you think the president's relationship with Russia and Putin stands?
I think it's in an early stage of a relationship. You know, he's keen on having relationships. You know, he often talks about President Xi, which is the long-term strategic threat to the United States of America, to be quite frank about it.
China.
As a result of that Mar-a-Lago meeting, and I think he credits himself as a result of the relationship, he was able to make some progress on North Korea with China. Now, whether that actually bears the fruit that we think it may remains to be seen. But I think he uses that as a framework. I'm going to have relationships, and possibly, even though the disagreements are significant, we may be able to make some progress. I think that's about what this is.
Okay, so he's determined to have that relationship, and that would be suggested by the second summit invitation. Do you think that's a good idea?
I don't have any problem with leaders of the world coming together with profound disagreements to talk to each other. I basically think it's actually a good thing. Listen, they're not going to. Ukraine, intractable. Syria, intractable. But can we extend the New START treaty for 5 years that's going to expire in 2021 as a result of these two presidents coming together? Yeah, they don't need approval from the Congress or the Duma. Can they agree for no nuclear proliferation and put pressure on North Korea and also put pressure on Iran? Is that possible? I think so.
Okay, but let's talk about the domestic politics here, because you know to have an effective foreign policy, you need domestic support. And the way the president handled that press conference has really hurt him in terms of his ability, I think, to maneuver inside Congress and have the support he needs. Why did he get such at odds with the intelligence community judgment about 2016 when he really didn't need to?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Monday was a disaster. I mean, I think it was a low point of his presidency, to be sure. I don't get it, to be frank, Paul. I mean, I know that they put a huge effort into working the issues, prepping the president, preparing him for the 4-hour summit, either the bilateral with staff or the one-on-one. But why didn't they prepare for the press conference?
The most obvious question that he'd get at that press conference.
Yeah, because it's an appendage to the summit, but it's the only place where the whole world is watching you. You know, I'm not in an executive position like that, but I've had a few press conferences in my life because things bad happened around my commands, and I rehearsed it, and I would say to the guys, okay, tell me what the outcomes are, all right, and tell me what the tone of this is going to be. Those are the two things I was stuck on. What were the outcomes of that press conference, and what should the tone of the president be? Both of those were wrong.
How much tension is there between, say, Jim Mattis and his view of Russia and DOD people, and one hand, and also the intelligence services, Dan Coates, the director of national intelligence, and their views of Russia and Putin with the president?
You know, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. And talking to the people around the president who I know, the president drives foreign policy and national security. Make no mistake about it.
Correct.
And listen, I think this president, I mean, despite this week of criticism, he's the toughest guy on Russia since Ronald Reagan. And the facts are on the table. Look at the Trump defense buildup, comparable to the Reagan buildup. It has to last a few more years, to be sure. Increasing the defense budgets in NATO. We have deployed additional troops on the eastern border, on the Russian border, okay? Not the degree that we need, but to be sure, Putin is paying attention to all those three things. Fourth, what we've done in Ukraine in terms of anti-tank weapons. And, of course, we've responded twice to Assad's chemical attack, and that's his ally. And we're pushing back on Iranians, and that's his ally. Putin is really paying attention to that. He's paying less attention to the rhetoric that goes on here.
You mentioned NATO. Let's listen to the president to answer a question from Tucker Carlson on Montenegro.
Membership in NATO obligates the members to defend any other member that's attacked. So let's say Montenegro, which joined last year, is attacked. Right. Why should my son go to Montenegro to defend it from attack? Why is that?
I understand what you're saying. I've asked the same question. You know, Montenegro is a tiny country with very strong people. They have very aggressive people. They may get aggressive. And congratulations, you're in World War III.
Now, deterrence is the core function of NATO or any alliance like this. Right. Does a comment like that suggest some doubt about whether or not we're willing to commit to that level of deterrence? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, one of Putin's major objectives, certainly, he resents the fact that Russia's strategic buffer from World War II to the present is gone, and that strategic buffer was Eastern Europe. And they had an agreement in the 90s that, you know, these countries would not become a part of NATO, but they ran towards NATO because they feared the intimidation and the coercion of Russia. And that's what Montenegro is all about. They want to get underneath the tent and get some level of protection. That comment there obviously denigrates the whole concept of what this is about. I think they eventually will likely probably come in because of the same reason all the other Eastern Europeans are in there. The president will support that, and they will be part of Article 5, collective defense, fight for one on behalf of the whole collective operation of NATO.
But if you're Putin, you look at that and say, maybe just a tad little bit.
No doubt about that. Yeah. I think he looks at Angela Merkel, to be quite frank about it. There's guys like me sitting around Putin and saying to him, if we took the 3 Baltic capitals, would Angela Merkel really commit her infantry?
That's exactly.
That's the question.
There's a possibility that we may well take up legislation related to this. In the meantime, I think the Russians need to know that there are a lot of us who fully understand what happened in 2016, and it really better not happen again in 2018.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell under pressure from members of both parties to respond to Russian election meddling and reiterate support for the American intelligence community following President Trump's controversial remarks this week. So what can Congress do to contain Vladimir Putin? Let's ask Wall Street Journal columnist Bill McGurn, editorial board member Mary Kissel, and columnist and Manhattan Institute senior fellow Jason Riley. So, Mary, I recall clearly last week you said the summit with Putin was a bad idea. Has the week made you change your mind about that? Or?
No, it hasn't. Well, I think it's safe to say this was not a highlight of the Trump presidency. Now, as to what Congress can do, they are a little limited, of course, because the executive branch is the one that sets foreign policy, but we have seen Congress impose some pretty significant sanctions on Russia, most notably after the invasion of Ukraine, and they could do so again.
Well, but how much damage here, before we get a little more on Congress, how much damage here do you think this has done? After the full week, he reversed himself, and then he has a second invitation to Putin. How much damage has Trump done to his presidency after this week?
Well, I'm not a Chicken Little, Paul. I don't think that the world is going to end because of one disastrous press conference. However, Trump did take a hit. I think he looked subservient to Putin, and I don't use that word lightly. And I think what he's done is unify Congress around the idea of cracking down on Putin. And he's raised concerns among the allies, too. Let's not forget about them. They rely on us in large part for leadership, whether it's in the Baltics or in Eastern Europe or NATO, as General Jack Keane just talked about. And I think his prestige took quite a big hit this week.
Jason.
I think they've spent the week trying to clean up this mess, and that gives you some idea of how much damage they think was done this week, hurting relations not only with the intelligence community but also with the European Union and NATO, and also domestically. Mary's right. Trump supporters like the fact he doesn't back down, he plows ahead, he doesn't apologize. Here he was standing next to Vladimir Putin, had the chance to tell him, we know what you did, don't do it again, and Trump went wobbly. And I think that he hurt himself domestically as a result of that.
Bill, what about this disagreements we're hearing about between some of the intelligence officials and the White House, particularly Dan Coats, the director of national intelligence? He seemed while being interviewed to be stunned by the news that the president has issued an invitation for Putin to come in the fall, and he issued a statement after the summit defending the intelligence community.
Right. Well, look, we all know that the Russians meddled. Everyone knows it. I think even President Trump knows it because he walked back his remarks earlier. Look, he's still the president. And I think this storm will pass, probably because another storm will come up and take its place. But I would like to see there are interesting ideas out there. First of all, we know from this that the sanctions really bite. Right? We know that the Russians, particularly Vladimir Putin, really hate those sanctions. I think the actions of this week will make it much harder to lift those sanctions, which is a good thing. And there are other interesting ideas. The Washington Post had a story saying we ought to move our troops from Germany to Poland. To me, that would be an incredible step forward.
Well, and speaking of a rebuke from Congress, Mary, 98-0 vote this week by the Senate warning the president not to take up Putin's request to have to come and have Russian prosecutors interview American officials who might know something about Bill Browder, who was one of the authors of the Magnitsky Act, a sanctions bill that passed in 2012 and has sanctioned, I think, about 51 Russians.
Putin is trying out the classic Cold War tactics, Paul, where he offers something in return for something that he shouldn't have. President Trump, of course, wants to question the people who were hacking into the DNC servers. And in return,
last week.
You're right. And in return, Putin says, oh, yeah, well, let me question these 12 Americans that I think have committed crimes against Russia. And Trump fell for it, unfortunately. Because of that backlash from Congress, he stepped back. That's a good thing. That also shows that checks and balances in the American system work. But the very idea that the White House spokesperson, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, didn't immediately shut that down, that Putin request, when she was asked about it this week, to me shows a fundamental lack of communication within the administration and a lack of understanding of Putin's method and his tactics.
It also shows an inability of Trump to distinguish two things here, which is Russian meddling and collusion. He needs to say over and over again, yes, we know Russia meddled, they better not do it again, and my administration had nothing to do with it.
They're separate issues.
They're separate issues. He continues to conflate them, and his political opponents have no problem
and
with
why
that.
Why does he keep conflating them?
I think that all he's thinking is collusion, and he's not distinguishing between the two.
He's thinking it undermines the legitimacy of his election. He
believes if he concedes on one, he's conceding on both. Yes.
Yeah, but you just make that distinction, and he's giving ammunition, Bill, to his opponents. What do you think of the second summit? Good idea?
No, I think it's a bad idea. I agree with Jason. Look, I think a lot of what has led Donald Trump to say certain things on Russia is he doesn't want to give his enemies any quarter, and that means saying some dumb things and setting off this kind of storm. That said, I think that, again, a lot of this is atmospherics, and we all get distracted about it. The president, like many presidents, gets distracted by the idea that having a one-on-one relationship with some dictator is going to improve the situation. That's a perennial problem, and I think the risks here, when you don't have something that you want specifically from them, shows what can happen. Look, with Kim, at least we know what we want to do. We want a denuclearized peninsula. So I don't think it's a good idea unless you're going to get something that you really want out of it, and you know that beforehand.
All right, Bill, thank you all.
And I totally agree.
Here with reaction, former White House Communications Director for President Trump, Anthony Scaramucci. All right, Anthony, what do you think about that?
Well, it's politics in America. That's probably politics globally. There's a level of hypocrisy that takes place, and so you and I know the cliche that when are politicians lying is when their lips are moving, and
Right.
so we know that, and so. But I do think he was playing to his audience, and that's what politicians do. He's a very good orator. He's got the best smile in American politics since Jack Kennedy, and so he's able to use that to good effect. But I think he is making a mistake. I think President Bush is correct that we should probably get out of the president-to-president denigration business because it's bad for the presidency, but it's also bad for the United States. We don't need to be doing that. And I will just say this, and you probably feel the same way. I have a lot of international business. When I'm off the shore of the United States, I never criticize President Obama or the Obama administration. We're all Americans, and so I think it's an unfortunate thing to be doing over there.
Do you think the president, because I don't think he has any self-awareness, do you think he realizes the toll he took on this country when it came to race relations, when it came to the economic wage stagnation, when it came to our foreign policy? Does he get that there are a lot of people in this country that think what he did overseas and domestically took the United States a decade backwards?
So let me slice into one of those things and hit it very hard, and that's the economy. And so what I really do think is that he had left-leaning policies, and he had never really run a business or made payroll like President Trump has done. And so what ends up happening is you don't realize how bad these left-leaning policies are until you're actually in business. George McGovern, you remember George McGovern, the great senator that ran against Richard Nixon? He opened a bed and breakfast after he left the Senate. He couldn't believe the regulations that were in place, and he went out of business after 2 years. And you can go Google this. It's a Wall Street Journal editorial. He wrote an editorial and said, my God, if I only knew what I know now about business, I would have never voted for all those regulations.
We should make Bernie Sanders open
all of that
coffee shop.
All of that crazy stuff. So the president was misguided on the economic policies, and so what you got to give President Trump huge credit for, he gets the economic policies right. He goes 10 for 10 on economic policies. And look at the African American unemployment rate. Look at the Hispanic American unemployment rate. Had historic recorded lows.
Yeah, and the numbers are great. And the president actually addressed that. He goes,
race, I want to leave alone.
Yeah, that's right. He goes, just because the economy's humming doesn't mean everything else can go to hell. And I think the president today, President Trump, thinks he can get away with anything because the economy's good. But people and his enemies nitpick on the little stuff that doesn't really matter, that doesn't affect the average American's life. But I want to talk about civility because we just talked about it at the top. And our friend Judge Jeanine Pirro went on The View to sell a book that she's been hawking, and it got a little feisty. Here's an exchange with Whoopi Goldberg.
I'm 62 years old. There have been a lot of people in office that I didn't agree with, but I have never, ever seen anything like this. I've never seen anybody whip up such hate. I've never seen anybody be so dismissive. Here's my question for you, because you talk about, I don't have Trump derangement. Let me tell you what I have. Okay. I have a lot of, I'm tired of people starting a conversation with Mexicans, liars, and rapists.
Well, but you know what's horrible?
That
when people who shouldn't be here end up murdering the children of American citizens.
You know what's horrible? When the president of the United States whips up people to beat the hell out of people. Say goodbye.
All right, so they cut to break, and then allegedly she gets booted off the headquarters, booted off the studio lot afterwards, and all hell broke loose. This isn't supposed to happen. You invite someone on your show, you're supposed to treat them with respect. She wouldn't even let her answer the question. This is par for the course, I think.
Well, I would add something, and I give the judge huge respect on this front. They added Anna Navarro to the show, and so what usually happens on these shows, you go 3-on-1. You know, if I'm on Bill Maher's show, it's like 6-on-1. You know, and so what they did was they didn't think they had the firepower there to handle her, and so they brought Anna on.
Yeah,
and so
Anna's
it's like,
CNN.
It's like
liberal.
4 liberals. You know, Megan is obviously not a liberal, but you know, so it's 4-on-2 if you want to say it. But
sure.
But I think her her book, which we didn't mention, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals.
Right.
That's a pretty tough title for a show like that.
They were angry
okay?
just reading the
just
title.
reading that. Okay, wait a minute. There's a couple of us may be on this book title. You know, so
Right.
I was like, rough, you know. And I don't say they're leakers or liars, but those are very liberal people.
Very liberal people. And
Yes.
you went on that show. Did they
Couple
treat
times.
you with any respect, or was it kind of out of the gates they tried to hammer you?
Yeah, they were coming full, they were coming at me very hard in the beginning, and then I would say to you that the second show I went on, and this is what I find always happens, Jesse, when people meet you, and they all of a sudden realize that you're not the caricature that the liberal media is painting of you. You're not that two-dimensional figure, but you actually have a family, you're a nice guy with a reasonable sense of humor. They have to relax a little bit, and so what we need to do in our country is less demonization and more personalization, and just relax. We're all Americans.
Right.
Why don't we take a chill with each other?
So when
play a little beer pong.
That's right. And Anthony and I are going to be playing beer pong against the 2018 national champs at the end of the show, so stick around for that. Anthony's been getting loose in the green room.
Yeah,
so
very loose.
He's very loose. A little too loose. We got to tighten that up.
Very loose, and my belly's empty, so I can drink all beer.
That's right.
Non-alcoholic beer.
Of course. You know, there's a lot of policies in place here. So, Maxine Waters, speaking of Whoopi Goldberg's disrespectful behavior, Maxine Waters, who, as we know, called for people to be chased out of restaurants, you know, get in their faces, run them out of town. There was a little counter-protest that never materialized outside around her office out in California, but a bunch of her supporters showed up, and you know what they did? They burned an American flag. Maxine Waters' supporters burned an American flag and chanted, "America was never great." Now, to say that Maxine Waters is the face of the Democratic Party, as Donald Trump has said, I think is just a devastating political blow to them in the midterms, because she is really hurting the party, and the more and more she does and says and her supporters act like this, the worse it's going to be in the midterms.
Well, I mean, listen, the violent stuff is also nonsensical, but I'm red-letter guy as it relates to the flag. I think you have to stand for the flag and not burn the flag. And I think there should be some level of unconditionality of love for the country, even though people have faced discrimination. Italians have, Irish have. Obviously, the African-American community came in bondage, which is a horrific stain on the nation. But we're moving forward, and we're making progress, and we're trying to make things fairer for everybody in the society. And so this sort of behavior, I think, sets us back. And I think it sends a symbol that we're not thinking about it as a community. Okay, the flag represents all of us. Don't step on it. Don't burn the flag. And by the way, we have many men and women have died for that flag.
That's a
over
great point.
242 years. And so, and we have many men and women have been wounded as a result of fighting for our freedom. Stepping on the flag is uncool. Don't do it.
Do you think that Maxine Waters has a responsibility to come out and condemn the supporters who are in her district, outside of her office, burning an American flag? Because I think she should say something.
I do, but she won't do that because she's going to play to that base of people.
That's a fringe base, Anthony.
She's
burning the flag.
But here's what these guys have done. The people on the fringe, as she represents the fringe, they know that stoking anger and getting people riled up, they will show up at the polls, okay? One of the things that President Trump said before the election, which I remember thinking, he said, if they're waiting for me for 8 hours in the rain to hear me speak in an arena, don't you think they're going to show up on November 8th to vote for me?
And they did.
So there was a tremendous amount of passion and emotion related to the election. They were really trying to reject the return of Clintonism.
It's a passion
she's
based
doing it
on,
in the opposite
It's a passion based on policy that they like from the president,
love of country.
and love of country.
Yes.
And these people, although I would say that's passionate, a lot of that's passionate hatred. And disrespect.
I agree with that. And so I think the best way to make change is if you've got something you're upset about, let's litigate it, let's argue about it, and then let's win at the ballot box. Okay?
We will win at the beer pong
I got guys that don't like my support. We're going to win at the ping pong.
Because,
let me tell you something.
Because we're playing beer pong later in the show.
If we don't win at the ping pong table, we're going to go out so gloriously. You and I are going to ride into the sunset together, Lone Ranger and Tonto.
There's no way we're losing.
It's just going to happen.
It's not happening. Meeting in the media and on the left, up in arms this week over the Trump-Putin meeting. So we wanted to know what the average American thinks. Who is a bigger threat, Trump or Putin? So we sent Diamond and Silk out to Palm Springs, California to find out.
Which one do you consider a threat, Trump or Putin? Trump. He's tearing families apart, and that's so wrong.
Do you know Obama had children in cages, locked up in cages, wrapped in foil, and nobody said anything about it? Do you understand that?
We didn't know that. But
well, okay, yeah. You got to stop listening to the fake news.
Well, I would have to say, well, Trump is closer to us.
Okay.
So anyone who is closer to you is going to be a bigger threat.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I voted for Trump. I stand for Trump. I think he's doing a great job.
Probably the most successful president since Reagan, and if he is around 8 years, he'll be more successful. Trump.
Have you gotten a tax cut?
No.
You didn't get no tax cut?
Not yet.
Are you an American citizen?
No, thank you.
Okay, we understand.
Diamond and Silk, join me now. Was that guy an illegal alien?
We think he may have been an illegal alien, Jesse, yes. So but he was willing to talk to us, so we appreciate the fact that he would talk to us. He got away from us very fast. Yeah.
Yeah, some people love you, and then other people run scared. Like the two white women were turned tail and saddled out of the shot. What were they so afraid of?
Well, you know what? First of all, they are afraid of being challenged. Right. And then some people don't want to be on camera. A lot of people support President Trump right here in California, which, this is a very liberal state. Right. So to see these people that really support him, I'm like, it is like, he can flip this state red. Mm-hmm. We believe that the president can flip this state red.
Well, that is a very, very bold prediction. And we'll see how that plays out. So you had a lot of people that said Trump was a bigger threat to the world than Vladimir Putin. And these are regular people just walking around in California. What does that tell you guys?
Well, you know what? If anyone called him a threat, the way we told them was, yes, he's a threat to poverty. That's right. He's a threat to the left-wing media. He's a threat to everything that the left stands for, how they want people to barely be surviving and not thriving in this country. That's right. So that's how we spend it.
He's like Ray to roaches.
Okay, that makes sense. So, that's right. Barack Obama, again, he can do whatever he wants. He's not president anymore, but he's popping up all over the place. And he just really said some bizarre things. We showed it at the top of the show. This is what he said about men.
Men have been getting on my nerves lately. I mean, I just, every day I read the newspaper, and I just think, like, brothers, what's wrong with you guys? I mean, what's wrong with us? All right, I mean, we're violent, we're bullying, empowering more women on the continent. That right away is going to, I think, lead to some better policies.
I mean, shameless pandering by the former president, Barack Obama. It just sounds just lame. I mean, just who's buying that anyway?
Well, you know what, Jesse? The mall is open, but no one is shopping. No one is buying President Obama's sugar honey iced tea. He's not the president anymore. He doesn't have the clue. Mm-hmm. And somebody should tell him, we don't want to hear his opinion because we don't care. And you're right. We appalled with him at being a man and him not doing anything for our country. He need to go somewhere and just be quiet because we don't want to hear anything else he has to say.
That's right. So stop popping in. It's time to drop out.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are on fire over there in California. Now, President Trump, obviously, speaking of malls and people shopping, I guess you can buy this somewhere on Instagram. They're selling lynching President Trump T-shirts. It's called, like, Hanging with Trump. It's a clothing line. I guess a bunch of libs in New York City put this out. Instagram's allowing this. They don't allow a lot of other stuff on the right, but this is okay for Instagram. I mean, just again, hurting Trump physically seems to be on the front of everyone's mind on the left in this country. Why do you think that is?
Well, you have to realize, this is what the left do. Mm-hmm. You have to realize that lynching, when we talk about lynching, the left promoted that back in the day. Remember, the Democratic Party, they promoted that. They were okay with that. But keep in mind now, when it comes to, this is the party that keeps saying that they are appalled about hate, yet they're promoting hate. Mm-hmm. Remember that. These are the lefties that keep saying, we don't like hate in this country, but you're the main one promoting it. Right. And again, Facebook owns Instagram. So it's not surprising to us that they let these disparaging
arch enemy Facebook, Zuckerberg, you guys don't like him. All right, ladies, we got to run. Have fun out there in sunny Southern California.
And here with reaction to my opening statement and all the developing news today, Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway, joins me now. Kellyanne, your thoughts on what's going on with conversation in America today?
That was one of your finest openings, Judge, and that's saying a great deal. I watched the clips of The View after the fact, and I have to credit you because this is what a guest should be. Prepared, poised, persuasive, and pleasant. And you were all of the above. You came armed with the facts, and the audience was listening to you, and a few times when a sprinkling in the audience actually wanted to clap, they stopped because they realized that that was probably not what the whole group wanted to do. And I thought that you acquitted yourself very well. I know you got some help from Meghan McCain, one of the panelists, but I think this is probably somebody who's appeared on The View and has been invited back and hasn't gone yet since I've been in the White House. I'll just say this. It's probably a good time for me to remind everyone who the real audience is when we're on television, including now. The audience are not the anchors. The audience are not the press sitting in the seats in the briefing room. The audience are the people. And this president got elected because he connected directly with the people.
Interesting.
Yes, the cameras were rolling. Yes, social media was covering it. But it was his message and the messenger and the delivery directly to the people, unfiltered, that was persuasive and compelling. The other thing you did yesterday was nobody could argue with your metrics. Nobody could say, no, you're wrong, Judge Jeanine. You're wrong that it's not the lowest unemployment rate in many years and the lowest unemployment rate ever for African Americans, for Hispanics, and for almost 70 years among women. You're wrong that 3.7 million new jobs or rehiring, reskilling opportunities were committed to President Trump and Ivanka Trump, who worked for months on this issue, by 23 major corporate CEOs in the White House on Thursday. This is a president who believes that diplomacy and conversation is better than hostility and conflict, and he will continue to speak in a bilateral fashion to other leaders around the world. I mean, nobody can argue with the metrics, so they have to shout you down.
Well, you know, Kellyanne, will you go back on The View?
I've been invited to go back on The View, and I've been invited by individual panelists and the producers and others at ABC. I would not foreclose that reason. I mean, I'm in Washington, D.C. My day job is here, and so I don't find myself in New York very often anymore. But I'm certainly not afraid of it. I'm afraid of people. I love getting sick and dying. I'm not afraid of conversation and conflict. I don't understand The View aside. Let me put The View aside for a moment, just to answer your general question about conversation today. I don't know what's got so many people so miserable, but when you engage with them, it's very clear immediately that they've been working on being miserable for decades, years and years and years. It didn't just happen in the last 18 months. I pray for them. I choose not to be like them. And I think if you're a happy warrior and you're pushing for an agenda that you believe in, and I very much believe in what's happening with the security and prosperity, small business ownership, the growth that we have, the unleashing of prosperity and opportunity for people in this nation. It's really amazing, and nobody can argue with those metrics, so they make it very personal. And what I liked most about your opening, Jeanine, is that nobody even wants to hear the first word sometimes. Not on that particular show, just generally. Everybody just in their corners, they don't want to hear. That's why when I tell people, particularly young people, they're the best ambassadors to bring people onto their own point of view, and here's why. People will look at them and say, I like you and you're like me. We have connective tissue together. And I encourage everybody out there to not be shy about their opinion, but to go forth.
Well, okay, and you know, I'm going to end, the interview, and I'm not going to go to another subject that I had planned to go on. When we
you did it, by the way, you made a big mistake though on The View, Jeanine. You made a big mistake. You mentioned President Obama's name. They don't like that. You cannot mention President Obama's name unless you're all googly-eyed and genuflecting.
When I was talking about
because
Russia.
You can't mention President Obama's. Right, well, you can't mention President Obama's name unless you're all glowing and googly-eyed and genuflecting. And here you were talking about President Trump's record, President Trump's bringing down the unemployment figures. I'll talk about President Trump getting the NATO allies to pay $44 billion up front in new dues with a commitment of hundreds of billions of dollars more. And so You also do that. People don't like when you raise President Obama now because it's not in connection with the tax cuts, the prosperity, the growth, the security, everything that's happening that's been improving. ISIS, on his watch, was going all around the globe. Now it is a shadow of itself.
No question.
And so many great things are happening in this country. The deregulation, the president is talking to many countries. He sat down with Chairman Kim. Look, the list goes on and on. We know what the metrics are, and people can't argue the facts, so they argue emotion. I think information beats emotion.
Without a doubt. Kellyanne Conway, thanks so much.
And in this case, it doesn't seem like our president cares. He wants to be friends with Putin for reasons that we're all still trying to figure out.
That's Hillary Clinton today, continuing the liberal freakout over President Trump's summit with Putin. Here with a reaction to that and much more, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who joins me now. All right, good evening, Governor. That was Hillary Clinton at the Ozzy Fest. And I didn't know what it was, but it's part music, part TED Talk, and part food fair. What do you think of that comment? Isn't it awful that the president doesn't care, he wants to be friends with Putin when she was the one who pushed the reset and on and on and on?
Well, I'm just going to say, and by the way, before I do it, congratulations on the book, #1 in America. You're clearly doing some things right, so don't let the critics worry you, and I know that you don't. But Hillary today was kind of comical in that here she is talking about friendship with Russia, but as you mentioned, she's the one who pushed the reset button. It was Barack Obama who reached over and tapped the knee of the then president and said, you tell Vlad, when this election is over, I can be more flexible. But the problem was they never took Obama and Hillary seriously because they didn't fear them.
Interesting. I want to move on from that. Something interesting happened this week when the director of national intelligence made news when he was at a conference, and the news came out that President Trump wanted to have President Putin to the White House, and he appeared flip. His response today is as follows. Some press coverage has mischaracterized my intentions in responding to breaking news presented to me during a live interview. My admittedly awkward response was in no way meant to be disrespectful or criticize the actions of the president. I and the entire intel community are committed to providing the best possible intelligence to inform and support President Trump's ongoing efforts to prevent Russian meddling in our upcoming elections, to build strong relationships internationally in order to maintain peace, denuclearize dangerous regimes, and protect our nation and allies, said DNI Director Dan Coates. Now, so did he get caught with his hands in the cookie jar?
Well, my question is, what caliber gun was being held to his head when he drafted that statement today? Because if there ever was a statement that was a CYA, you just read it directly from Dan Coates. Look, here's what I think people don't understand about Donald Trump. He doesn't sleep a lot. He works harder than anybody I've ever seen. He has so much going on that even his own staff cannot keep up with all that's going on. I used to have a chief of staff, and she would often say that if I know everything that's going on, there's not enough going on. Well, let me assure you, in the Trump White House, there is nobody that knows everything that's going on because nobody can keep up with that much stuff.
But, I've often said that the man is a force of nature, and I even talk about it in my book. I mean, he's the kind of guy that can go into a den of lions and come out with his suit and tie straight and something to put on the wall near the fireplace. But anyway, Governor Mike Huckabee, your final thought on what is happening today in America with the conversation between the right and the left.
There's not a conversation. They're screaming from the left to the right. They don't want us to show up to eat. They don't want us to shop in a store. They don't want us to be a business. It's not a conversation. And that's tragic because I like having conversations with people with whom I disagree, but I want it to be civil. I don't want to scream at people. I don't want people necessarily screaming at me. And I'm very saddened that some people hate Donald Trump so much that they don't even want to step back and say, what is he doing for the country that I can agree with and like?
And that's where we need to get.
And on a personal level, your daughter is Sarah Huckabee Sanders. All right, Governor Mike Huckabee,
Yes.
thanks so much for being.
It's popular nowadays to say ICE is bad, but there's no better representation of American values right now than ISIS. And as an equal opportunity employer, we accept all levels of experience and education, from low to very low, and actively welcome those with diagnosed anger issues. Take it from me, no organization is better than ISIS.
Outrage tonight over that parody by comedian Michelle Wolf comparing ICE to ISIS terrorists. My panel is fired up, ready to battle, so let's get to it and see what they think. NRA TV contributor and former aide to Chuck Schumer, radio show host Chris Hahn joins me now. And Chris and Dan. Dan, I'll start with you. No, actually, no. Chris, I want to start with you. Was that too far?
You know, look, it's comedy, and you've got to give a wide berth to comedy. And, you know, as for, you know, the ICE agents, I don't know what they should be more upset about, this comedy skit or being ordered to take kids from their parents. They're probably more upset about the orders to take kids from their parents.
Dan?
You know, here we go, Judge. Every time Chris comes on every time and says things that are just factually incorrect, and he expects the whole audience to believe them because he worked for Senator Schumer. Nobody was ordered to take kids from their parents. This is fact time, folks, so we can put Chris aside and deal with reality now. There was a court decree called the Flores Consent Decree that determined, by the way, this has been in existence way before Donald Trump.
Chris, let him finish.
That we cannot hold kids for more than 10 days. Therefore, those kids, unless we want to keep them in custody, Judge, they can't be kept with their parents. Chris either doesn't know that or he's on the air lying to the audience again.
You know about the Flores decision, Chris. Yes or no?
I of course know about the Flores decision.
Yeah.
What's being done here right now is that the president has ordered all asylum seekers to be treated like criminals, and ICE agents are being forced to take children from their families. And one other thing, they don't even know where they put them because the Department of HHS had no system to track them. That's a problem in this country, and they've already failed to meet the court expectations to get them back together.
No, the court was very complimentary.
That's where the outrage needs to be.
You're wrong, Chris, but Dan, go right ahead.
Judge, it's exhausting having to come on your show every Saturday and debunk Chris. I'm glad you. I actually like Chris off the air, but on the air, he constantly says things that I do. No, seriously, you are a great guy off the air. But on the air, he makes stuff up all the time, and he expects you to believe him. Judge, let's be crystal clear on this. These are not asylum seekers. The process for seeking asylum is to go to a port of entry. You will not be arrested if you do that. When you enter the country, this is fact time, between ports of entry, you have committed a crime. Therefore, you will be arrested and likely separated from your kids like any other criminal. See, Chris doesn't know that, or he does and he's lying again.
I do know that. And I also know that the president got rid of an Obama policy that would have allowed these people to seek asylum in their home country. He's also shortened the amount of people who are working at the border crossing, forcing these people into the desert.
All right, Chris, listen to me. Now you're saying the president, and they can go to any port of entry and seek asylum, all right? Now, the ACLU, representing a whole bunch of them, said they weren't sure whether they wanted to seek asylum. They wanted a week to think about it after the parents and the kids were reunited. So if they all want to seek asylum, some of them reunited don't even want asylum. They said, oh, I'm not sure. I didn't come here looking for that.
They're being pressured in these court cases. They're being pressured when their kids are taken away from them. And of course, they should have time to think about their legal options.
No, their kids are back. If they came Chris, you said they came seeking asylum. If they came seeking asylum, when we reunite them, why do they have to think about whether they want asylum? Dan, hit it.
I think that
Judge, one thing Chris is leaving out of this as well, because it's always convenient to leave out the facts, which he has a really hard time with. Donald Trump signed an executive order asking his own DOJ to challenge the Flores consent decree, which happened before Donald Trump even took office, and the court said, no, Dice, it doesn't work that way. Meaning Donald Trump is actually trying to do something about this situation, whereas Chris comes on the channel every Saturday and just makes stuff up for propaganda.
What he's trying to do, Dan, is hold children indefinitely in detention if they come here.
You know what, Chris, I'm not going to let you say that.
Let's be clear what's going on here.
All right, let's talk about Putin. Now we're totally off the facts.
By the way, back to Michelle Wolf, clearly the outrage is more about the policy than the comedy.
Really? You like ICE agents being dressed up looking like they're about to chop your head off?
Chris is so insane right now. The camera guy's laughing in the room with me. That's how he's actually laughing behind me.
All right. At least we're all laughing. That's a good thing. Now, I want to talk about the president. A lot of backlash from his meeting with Putin. What's your reaction, Dan, the meeting with Putin? I'll start with you this time.
Well, listen, Donald Trump, he made a verbal misstep. He acknowledged it the next day. He corrected it. But what Donald Trump, the way he always dumps on the liberals and the media, is Donald Trump makes a misstep. Let's say it's a 5 out of 10. So what does the media do? They react like it's a 9 out of 10. Nazi comparisons, Pearl Harbor comparisons. By the way, Judge, this really happened. This treasonous, kooky John Brennan who's lost his mind. So what happens? The next day, the argument becomes about the kooky media response and not a misstep by Trump that he corrected.
Okay,
and that's how he dunks on him every single time.
Seconds. Chris, hit it.
The best thing you could say about Trump and Putin this week was that the president looked weak before Putin. That's the best thing you could say. As for the verbal misstep, nobody in America buys the wood versus wooden thing, and that was just part of the problem with that press conference. There was all sorts of problems there, plus the president sitting in a room alone with that dictator. Ooh. What did he say? America has a right to know.
All right. Chris Hahn, Dan Bongino, thanks so much. Disgraceful. Turning Point USA Communications Director Candace Owen joins me now with reaction to that and more. All right, so what do you think of this MSNBC contributor and the fact that she thinks that the president committed treason, which, by the way, for anyone who's interested, the punishment is death? Go ahead, Candace.
I don't know what's going on in all of these leftist networks or where they're getting their information from. It just seems absolutely ridiculous that they keep doing this. It's almost like they're playing historical bingo. Every single day they drudge up a different historical, horrific event that we lived through and try to apply it to Trump because they want people to be fearful. And ultimately what this does is it cheapens evil. It cheapens what we actually lived through. It cheapens what the Jews lived through when they compare him to Hitler. It cheapens what the men died. Absolutely. What they died fighting for. The soldiers of America died fighting for our freedom. It cheapens all of that when they make these comparisons.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And you know, it's an attack like 9/11 where 3,000 Americans died. Yeah, but I want to move on. Now, we have another sound on tape, Candace, of Jimmy Kimmel. Take a listen to this.
I would rather we had a chimpanzee as president of the United States. At least with a chimp, there would be somebody to eat the bugs out of Rudy Giuliani's hair.
I didn't even get the last part of it, but go ahead, Candace.
Look, I would rather we had a comedian for a late-night talk show rather than Jimmy Kimmel, who gets up there every single night, cries, brings up his child, uses his child as a prop to get other people to cry. So, look, we don't always get what we want, Jimmy. That's all I can say to him.
Yeah, but what about this? Well, I don't get the chimp and the bugs and Rudy Giuliani's hair. I mean, what? I mean, to comment on that?
He single-handedly ruined late-night TV. I really do believe Jimmy Kimmel does this. He somehow thinks he's like a political spokesperson, tries to be funny. It's never funny. I think that has to be a fake audience. I don't get it whatsoever, but he keeps going on up there, and good for you, Jimmy. Keep it going.
Okay. And finally, the young lady, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, on PBS firing line. Take a listen.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that? I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes. Do you think you can expand on that? Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also just, I am not the expert at geopolitics on this issue.
You know, this woman won she tossed out in this primary Joe Crowley, who is a Democrat, very powerful Democrat from Queens. She clearly doesn't understand the issues, and I'm not being critical. I mean, she's a very young woman who's never, held office before. But wow, if you don't know what you're talking about, don't talk about it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. This was my absolute favorite clip of the week. I watched this hundreds of times and laughed out loud. I mean, that moment, I wasn't really expecting you to ask me a question. Usually when I make up a random occupation, no one asks me a question about it. This is hilarious, and I have to say this. Trump needs to put her on payroll. She is the ticket to winning again in 2020. Keep her in front of a camera, Judge.
Well, her candidacy was very much supported by, I think it was the Democrat Socialist of America, and she's an avowed socialist. I mean, there are socialists who are winning elections throughout the country. I mean, the Democratic Party doesn't seem to be in one place or the other. It's like it's all over the place. And by the way, I heard she referred to turning a state red. She was looking forward to it.
Yeah, she did that today, and that wasn't even the worst part of the interview. The worst part of the interview is when the journalist asks her what she thinks about the lowest unemployment rate ever, and she says that the reason the unemployment rate is so low is because people have 2 jobs. I mean, it's incomprehensible. It makes absolutely no sense. She's a comedian. Right. She should take Jimmy Kimmel's job.
All right, Candace Owens, thanks so much.
Let's welcome tonight's guest. If he ever becomes a porn star, he won't have to change his name. Former CIA officer and radio TV host, Buck Sexton. Buck Sexton. Practicing her name. I'm practicing her name. She's our business reporter from north of the border, the best Canadian import since Molson Beer, Fox Business Network reporter Christina Partsinevelis.
Yeah.
Partsinevelis. Partsinevelis. She's so bright the sun seeks shade from her. National Review reporter Kat Timpf. I could say her name. And just like the Vatican, he's famous for his mass. That's a great one. WWE superstar, massive sidekick, kick, tyrants, Freudian slip. Buck, I love this week. I love this week. It was hilarious. Every day I was laughing.
It was the Super Bowl of snowflakeism. It was like nothing I've ever seen in my life. You've never seen so much pearl clutching. In fact, wherever you set the boundaries of what's too crazy for mainstream media publications to say, you're like, okay, look, press conference wasn't amazing. This isn't the second coming of Metternich. Like, I can understand why some people might have some issues here.
Right.
But it's not as bad as Pearl Harbor. Bam! Headline. It's as bad as Pearl Harbor. Somebody even compared it to Kristallnacht. I know. I'm like, is this just because you don't want to do the usual Hitlerian thing? So you decided to get specific? These people completely lost their minds. And now we're at the end of the week. And then we know people don't care about it because we got Avenatti back on TV. So this is the loop. This is the script.
It's true. Now it's back to porn stars and sex. The way I like it, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Christina, you cover money and business, and you do it well at Fox Business. The economy seems immune to any of this stuff, and Americans seem immune.
It's true. It's true. We just hit the lowest unemployment rate that we've seen since 1969. I knew you'd appreciate that date. And then we're also, well, since you've talked about your third nipple already, drugs, and porn stars. I gotta. But more importantly, Yes is doing well. We had a bunch of earnings that came out this week. Very, very strong. However, because I cover business news, my only color is green, we have to be concerned about the trade tariffs.
I agree.
And inflation coming up too, and lack of wage growth. So there are some factors that can weigh heavily on the economy.
I'm worried, and if that stuff happens and goes south, he's going to be in a bit of trouble.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because he's taking credit for this big boom right now, and if it goes south, he's going to get hit by the media.
Kat, what do you say about the second summit? Aren't you excited? Putin's going to come here. Maybe he'll go to Mar-a-Lago. Maybe we can throw him a military parade.
I know that there's going to be a lot of outrage, even if it goes well. It doesn't really matter. Because we saw with this press conference this week, we saw Trump saying the exact same things as he's been saying since he was a candidate, saying he wanted to get along with Putin. You may like it, you may not like it, but it's not new. And yet everybody reacted as if it was some sort of crazy new thing. It wasn't some crazy new thing. It was exactly what he's been saying. It's almost as if people aren't actually paying attention to the news, and just when they see other people get mad, they get mad too, because they want to all be in a nice little mad club where they all just breathe on each other really heavily.
I agree. It's all about being mad. Tyrus, anything bothering you about this?
Yeah, I'm pissed. I'll tell you why. It never should have happened.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with anything you think. He made him wait an hour?
Putin made him wait.
I would have left my girl in the house if she made me wait 15 minutes. This is the United States of America, Jack. We wait for no one. When he got there, it should have been a little intern named Roy going, I'm sorry you missed the president, Mr. Putin. Maybe next time. Like, that's the only thing I was mad about. We don't wait. We don't wait. You're out your mind, but whatever. Okay, I'll let that pass. The press conference, to me, I always look at things through my life path. And I've been out in a restaurant with lots of friends, and maybe you're having some issues at home.
Yeah.
And the press is the angry girlfriend.
Yes.
Who decides to bring up something personal while you're trying to entertain friends. Yeah. And you have that awkward, why would you bring that up here? I'm with my friends. What the hell? And that's basically what happened with Donald Trump and the press. They started asking questions. You see him up there going, it's like you're going to bring up my bastard child right now in the church meeting. Like, this is the place we need to bring this up. Like, I'm sorry, Reverend. Just give me a second. Why you do this whenever we go out? This is why I don't take you nowhere.
That is so true. Yeah. That's what Trump was like. Trump is like, okay, look.
And it's love child.
Yeah, it's love child. No, but it's true. It's like he is saying, I'm trying to deal with this guy. We can talk about that stuff later. No, I want to talk about it now.
Exactly.
That was my reporter voice. Pretty good one. I'm sorry.
No.
I wasn't imitating you, Christina. Because there was no from the Canadian side.
I don't say that, and I don't say a boot either, and I don't drink Molson.
What do you drink?
Garbage.
What? It is garbage? There are spots.
I shouldn't say that. Yeah, no.
I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited for the next summit. I can't wait. I hope I get to go. Like Hannibal Lecter after skipping breakfast, the Democrats crave a fresh face. But who does Trump want to see plenty in 2020? I bet he dreams about Biden.
I dream about Biden. That's a dream. Look, Joe Biden ran 3 times. He never got more than 1%. And President Obama took him out of the garbage heap, and everybody was shocked that he did. I'd love to have it be Biden.
Me too. Just to hear more about the dreams. But Dems see it differently. A new poll shows that 3 out of 4 of them think it's time for a fresh face to take on Trump in the next election. The 4th Democrat said he wanted this guy. Yep, Alf. After all, they do love their aliens. I like that. Seriously, take a look at the last few candidates. Hillary, Bernie, Joe. They got 5 presidential bids among them and 0 wins. So yes, a fresh face seems to be in order. And you don't get much fresher than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's the one who came out of nowhere and beat the incumbent in the New York primary. And she's breathed new life into the party. Haven't you, Alex?
I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas. I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue. I do think that right now, when we have this no-holds-barred, Wild West hyper-capitalism, capitalism has not always existed in the world, and it will not always exist in the world.
She's right. Hyper-capitalism won't always exist in the world because it's not capitalistic enough.
Tired of regular old capitalism full of private property and competitive markets? Then you'll love super turbo hyper capitalism. It's the first system where every worker gets their own startup. It's more goods, more services, and more reverse mortgage captors made of gold. In super turbo hyper-capitalism, we're privatizing everything. Breathing, eating, flexing, dancing, and even vomiting. You'll get paid for all of it. And with full employment all the time, that means all pets have jobs. And all babies know how to fry. Plus, the retirement age is never. And the best part of super turbo hyper-capitalism, the stock market only goes up. And if it ever even starts to go down, Lou Dobbs has a hot tub party and it goes back up. So get ready for super turbo hyper-capitalism. And if you don't agree with us, you probably support ISIS.
You probably do. All right. Christina, I go to you because you're a business reporter and a damn good one. You watch these. We're a capitalist country, but we have a party that seems to be adopting the principles of the losing countries of history, socialism. That can't be good, right, business reporter?
I think that right now there needs to be a revamp of the Dems, which is why you have a 28-year-old right now that's become the new face. We got to give her some credit, but I'm not going to discount the fact that she needs to know how to answer questions. If she's in the limelight, she's going to run for a big position. She needs to know how to answer. It's not going to affect markets right now. Like you said, we're seeing a lot of green. And capitalism, that's what makes this country go round. And for all of us to have jobs and have money. So I don't believe in that at all.
Is that why you left Canada, because they're communist?
No, Canada's a great place. Medicare for all.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
Yes, I see what you did there. And it was wrong. And this will be the last time you're on this show. Hey, Kat.
Come on, give me a break.
I will. Kat, should Democrats maybe stop expecting Cortez to be such a big deal like the next, I don't know, Obama? I don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
They should. I think that the Dems are screwed.
Right.
I think that Trump is going to win. I think they have a choice between a lot of old faces, very old faces, and then these like new faces that are just like spewing garbage out of them.
Yes.
I mean, her answer was so bad. She's also said a lot of other really kind of dumb stuff. Like the reason unemployment is low is because everyone has 2 jobs, which is, you have to give her points for creativity and even thinking that is how it works. But, you know, she's a former bartender. She's only 28 years old. She's not really ready for a position like that. So fresh faces might help, but fresh faces with more thoughts behind them.
Okay. I think she's got a lot of potential. I think she has a lot of potential because I can tell she's a good person, but also a socialist. Tyrus, what's wrong?
With me?
No.
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
Yes.
We still talking about Democrats?
Yes.
Oh, man. Oh. First of all, I just think of, who was the cat who ran for Libertarians? Was it
Johnson?
Johnson?
Gare Bear.
Yeah, Gare Bear.
Yeah.
When they asked Gare Bear that Syria question, he was like, and it was over for Gare Bear, right?
Yeah, it was.
She's like, oh, I'm not really an expert, and then she just invented a word.
Yes.
Which is kind of the page out of somebody else I know, but he knows how to do it better.
No,
so
what Trump would say is he would just say, I'm going to get the best people on that.
Yeah, and it's going to be the greatest thing, where she was like hyper capitalism. So, yeah, here's the thing with the Dems. They just need to have like 700 people run.
Yes.
And just have like a battle royal, little wrestling, and throw out the guys, and, you know, it probably will be at the end Hillary standing with a steel chair with Bernie underneath her. I mean, it's just, I think you said it, what was it, last week? Hillary. We're probably going to have the rematch.
I think we're going to have a rematch.
Just because the new faces aren't smart faces, not quite yet, and the old faces ain't going anywhere. They got all the money. So I think we're going to have a really fun, exciting bloodbath on our hands.
What about you, Buck? What do you see 2020 shaping up to be? What's underneath that massive pile of hair of yours?
Jealous? It's real, by the way. It's real, I promise. I get really mean tweets about it all the time. Nothing lives in there. That's all a lie. It's totally real. It's my own.
What's wrong with hair that's not real?
So about the economy.
Yes.
So what I've got here, you have on the one, you've got this progressive socialist party, or part of the party rather. And on the one hand, you've got the Bernie Sanders wing, and they remember the Soviet Revolution like it was yesterday.
Right.
And you've got the Ocasio wing, and they don't know what the Soviet Revolution was. So you get to sort of pick between what's definitely out of the mainstream, I think, for a lot of Americans. But on either side, they're not going to have that centrism. By the way, I think you guys are mostly joking about Hillary. I'm not joking. I think
serious.
She's going to toss the rosé over the shoulder, and she's coming back out swinging. She thinks that she will be the default candidate once again. She's already lost twice. What's the third time? I don't think it's...
I call it the first sentence of the obituary problem. She doesn't want the first sentence of her obituary to be lost to Trump.
So she wants to say lost to Trump twice.
I mean, just by way of, one thing, Biden isn't even the guy they're talking about yet, and Trump squashed him like one of those bugs at a picnic that you don't know what it is, but it's just between your fingers already this week.
Yeah. You know what? I love, though, how the same group of people who hate Trump are desperately seeking their own Trump. It's like to the Democrats, Trump are the vegetables and they're the baby. They hate the taste, but they know it's good for them. They need to get a Trump, right?
Well, it's worked, so why not? So we're going against it, but it worked for the Republican Party, so why not find that for the Democratic Party?
Exactly, and I believe it's Mark Ruffalo.
I was just thinking about it. They need to have just a mystery guy. It needs to be a black box with a question mark on it through the entire thing. And then if they happen to win, they just step out like, boom.
Play Guess Who.
That's like that dating show.
Yeah.
That's something.
The dating game.
Yes. Thank you.
Pretty simple.